Hashem, Boker, Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Sanhedrin, Lamevav, Sanhedrin 36. Today, the Daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Hatzal for the Shvuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. We're going to start on Lamevav, Amid Aleph, around 10 lines from the top. As we come to the passage, the two dots, where the Gemara had said, the Mishnah had stated, that Dine Mamanos Atmeos V'Taharos, that when it comes to the monetary matters and deciding whether something is ritually pure or impure, you could start from the senior rabbi. But when it comes to the capital cases, you have to start from the junior judge. So as not, and we'll see why you start from the junior judge in capital cases. But in monetary cases, you start from the senior judge. The Gemara says, "Amar Rav, Ana Havid b'Minyana debei Rav," and Rav says, "I was amongst those who were one of the judges in the academy of Rav." Even though I wasn't the senior judge, obviously Rebbe was a senior judge, yet they still started from me. Gemara asked the question, but didn't we say you have to start from the senior judge when it comes to a monetary case? So I'm a Rabbi Braid the Rabbi, Rebbe Hill Braid the Rebbe Boas, Shani Minyan to be Rebbe, the cool Minyanu Minatzad Abimat Rebbe's Bezdin was different, that even in monetary cases, they started from the side. And Rashi says, because Rebbe just had tremendous humility. And if you look at the last stop in Maseches Sota, it says, when Rebbe died, humility ceased to be in existence in the world. Rebbe was the most humble of all. And so therefore, he said, even in monetary cases where you don't want to start with me, we'll start from the side to hear the younger judges. So Rav was not the most senior judge, he was the least senior judge, and that's why he started first. So since we cited Rebbe Boas, who's unusual, we cite him again. He says, the most Moshe about Rebbe, since we are also talking about Rebbe's humility, but Rebbe had tremendous authority. He was both the Nasi and obviously the head of the court. So he had both religious authority and political authority because he was the Nasi. The Nasi was like the president of the community. So the Gemara says, from the days of Moshe until Rebbe, from Moshe Rabbeinu was also the Melech and also the Torah teacher. From his days until Rebbe, we never saw religious authority and political authority concentrated in one person. From Moshe Rabbeinu to Rebbe. And the Gemara says, well, is that really the case? That Yoshua, what about Joshua? The Gemara says, no, he had to share responsibilities with Elazar. Pinchas, what about Pinchas? How was the Canaan? They were the elders. Shaul, what about Shaul? Shmuel, no, he had to share with Shmuel. The Gemara says, it can't be. It's not that he's just sharing it with Shaul. It can't be the case. That can't be the case. Shmuel. There was Shmuel who was also at the same time as Shaul. The Gemara says, but then Shmuel died. So the Gemara says, I mean, from the moment that he ascended authority, there was nobody else who was on his level. The Gemara says, David. What about David? David was subservient in Torah study to Iri. Mar Moikatan talks about Iri would sit on the pillows, and David would still be sitting on the floor. What about after he died? We mean all the Davids of life. Shlomo, what about Shlomo? What about Shlomo HaMelech? Gemara says, Shimi ben Gera. Even though Shimi ben Gera ultimately became a traitor at the outset, he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham, the preeminent one of the generation. Gemara says, Valkatle. But didn't Shlomo HaMelech end up having to kill Shimi ben Gera? So the Gemara says, we mean all the years of his life. But Chizkiah, what about Chizkiah? We had this earlier in our tractate. The Gemara says, Shivna, that Shivna was had more followers than him. But didn't Shivna die because he sided with Sanhedrin? So the Gemara says, in all the years of his life. But Ezra, what about Ezra? Nechemiah ben Chakoyai, there was Nechemiah ben Chakoyah who was his partner. Also, I say me most Rebbe Rav Ashi. From Rebbe until Rav Ashi. Now, Rav Ashi is generally assumed to be the last of the generation, the one who edited the Talmud. So Rav Ada, this statement was written after Rav Ashi. So it must be Rav Ashi didn't necessarily edit the whole Talmud. So he says, from the days of Rabbi until Rav Ashi, Torah from Rabbi until Rav Ashi, we don't find it. What about Huna bar Nasan? And he was very close to the king. So the Gemara says, Huna bar Nasan maketh havakayaf Rav Ashi. He would submit himself to Rav Ashi. Means to say Rav Ashi was a greater Torah scholar. Gemara says, Dine nefashos matchil min hatzav. When it comes to capital cases, we start from the side. Minan Emili, what's the source for this idea that when it comes to a capital case, we start from the side? Amar Rav Acha bar Papa Amar Kra says in the pasuk, Lo sana al riv. Do not answer for an argument, but it's written without the yud, so it means Lo sana al rav. Do not argue with the senior judge. So Rashi's actually, we'll take a moment and look at the Rashi. Ksiv below yud, it's written without a yud. Therefore, don't argue with the greatest one of the court. Therefore, we don't start from him in a capital case. Maybe the senior judge will see a reason to convict and nobody will argue. So therefore, you start from one of the junior judges. He starts and argues to acquit, and those who agree with him. It's not 100% clear from Rashi why nobody will argue with the senior judge. Is it out of respect, and it's just an accepted custom, or is it prohibited? Is it a prohibition of the Torah? Osana al Rav, you're not allowed to. The Rashi doesn't clarify that. It's a little bit ambiguous on that point. So the Gemara says, hold on one second. That's the whole idea. There's a dispute amongst Rishonim. If Osana al Rav implies that you're prohibited to argue on the greater judge, that's why Rabbeinu Yonah explains Rashi, and also Rashi himself writes, Rashi himself writes this. That's how they interpret it. And in his commentary on the Torah, he says, you don't do it. And also the Smag writes this, but, however, there are some who say that it's not prohibited, just the opposite. If a student sees a reason to say, to acquit, he's not allowed to be quiet. So we're just concerned that he's going to be embarrassed, and so therefore we set it up the other way. This is how the Nemuka Yosef and the Ran, in the name of Rabbeinu David, and also Rabbeinu Yonah himself. So there's a dispute amongst the Rishonim if it's because you're not allowed to, or it's because we're worried that the student will not do it. So therefore, we continue. Mara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Me'hachad. This is the source. Vayomer David la'anashav. David says to his men when they were deciding how to judge Navala Carmeli, Chigru ish es charbo. Everybody gather up their sword, which was really to be a judge. Vayachru ish es charbo. Vayachru gam David es charbo. So David did it last. And they were judging him because he was rebellious against the king. Rav says a person can explain the matter to a student, show him like the different arguments, explain it, and then adjudicate the case with him in a capital case. And we count them as two separate judges, and that judge can be the judge. You count him, the student. So the Gemara says, when it comes to ritually pure and impure, then it could be a father and a son and a teacher and a student. Monin lahem shnaim. There they could sit there and count them as two, because Rashi says, no, you don't really need a count. You don't need to count up judges. One is sufficient. But dine mamanos, the dine nefashos, monetary case and a capital case, the dine makos and lashes, kiddush achodesh, ibor shana, the calendar, any place where you need to count three judges, avu beno ravatomino emon echad. you only count them as one. So how by capital case can we count the student and the teacher as two separate votes? So the Gemara says on top of 36b, Kika Amarav, when Rav was saying you count as two separate votes, that's like Rav Kahana and Rav Asay, that the Ligmare, the Rav Havutzriche, Vizbore, the Rav Havutzriche. They needed the content from Rav, but not the analysis. And so therefore, they were not 100% his students. They were independent. Rashi says they were Gavra Ba'ape Navshayu. They were independent minds. So therefore, you can't assume that they were saying the same thing that Rav said. Amar Be'avoa, Sarat Varim, Yesh Ben Dina Mamnos Dina Nefashos. There are 10 distinctions between a capital case and a monetary case. V'kuan ein nohagen mishor niskol. Even though an ox that's stoned for killing somebody is judged before a court of 23, that's the only distinction between the ox and the monetary case. But the other 10 distinctions between the capital case and the monetary case don't apply in this matter. We know, Emilia, how do we know it doesn't apply to the shor niskol, that it's only that it's judged with 23, but all the rest are monetary case laws? It says you should not pervert the judgment of the poor person in his disputes. The judgment of the poor you don't pervert, or you don't. The mishpat avyoncha yatamateh, meaning to say that the idea is when it comes to the capital case, you don't make. We say you don't make a majority of one to convict. So we're saying the judgment of the poor you don't convict on the basis of one person. But if it would be on judgment of an ox, then you would convict on the basis of just a single judge, like a monetary case. So the Gemara says, Sarah, why do we say there were 10 distinctions between capital cases and monetary cases? There are really 9 distinctions. Why did Rabbi Avo say that there are 10? So the Gemara says, Sarah Katani. What do you mean? There are 10 that are listed in the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, no, this is what Rabbi Avo's question is. Mishum de'ena kol ksherin hesrim mishlosha chadahi. The idea that not everybody is capable of judging Din Nefashos, and the law that Din Nefashos need a court of 23, they're really just considered one matter, because the idea that everybody's kosher to judge a monetary case comes to include a mamzer, as we'll say later on. He's able to judge a monetary case, and he can't judge Din Nefashos. And that's already going to be included in the law that you need 23 judges, which is the Sanhedrin, because the defect in the mamzer is because he's not allowed to sit in the Sanhedrin. And so therefore, for this reason, you can't put a mamzer into the court of 23. And so from the fact that we say a mamzer can judge, you don't look at the case of the mamzer in the court of 23 as two separate arguments. And so now we see why Rabbi Avo is only counting this as 9. What's the reason why the mamzer can't sit in the Sanhedrin? Because it says, "V'shavtu ata'am b'chol eif, v'yakol davar gadol yaviu alecha, v'kol davar katan yishpetu heim v'akal me'alecha v'nasu itcha." The Dorshim, and we expound this word, that they should be similar to you and like you. And so therefore, for this reason, and so therefore, for this reason, they can't be a mamzer. Gemara says, but there's another brisa that counts other reasonings. Tanya. In our Mishnah, there's only 9, but nevertheless, Rabbi Avo was saying there's 10. Why? Because there's another brisa. Tanya, Emo Shiva Sanhedrin, Zakein, Saris, and Mishem Obanim. You don't allow it to go into the Sanhedrin, somebody who's too old. Rashi says he's forgotten the pain of what it is to raise children. Sar Gidol Banim. And so therefore, since he's forgotten that pain, he's out of touch. Now, Amos Shiva to the Sanhedrin, Saris, Zakim, the Saris is somebody who's not sexually mature, and Mishem Obanim, somebody who has no children. Rashi says, and they're not merciful. Rabbi Yehuda Mosif Afach Zari. Rav Yehuda also adds on somebody who's cruel, the Chilufam, but Maces. And the Maces, someone who's insider, you put these people, you daf to put these people in to be the judge. Rahmana Amar, the Torah says you're not going to have compassion and mercy on the Maces. Everybody, now we go back to the case we discussed. Everybody is capable. So the Gemara says everybody's capable to judge a monetary case. What does it come to include? Amar Rav Yehuda, even a mamzer. Tanina Charazim. Then we learned this in the Mishnah Nida. Ko aroy ladun din in fashos roy ladun din in mamanos v'yesh roy ladun. Whoever can judge capital case can judge a monetary case, and there are some who can judge a monetary case. Ve'en roy ladun din in the fashos. V'avina ben we say lasuye mai. What does it come to include? From Rav Yehuda lasuye mamzer. It includes even a mamzer. So the Gemara says, includes even a mamzer. So the Gemara says we need to say twice. Chad lasuye ger, v'chad lasuye mamzer. One tells us mamzer can judge monetary cases. The other tells us a convert can judge it. So the Gemara says, we need both. If we just had the case of the convert, because the convert is allowed to marry a Jew of a mamzer, but a mamzer who can't marry a regular Jew, I might say he can't judge a monetary case. He asked me a mamzer, but so telling us that the mamzer can do it. To Bami Tipak Shera. At the end of the day, his father was Jewish. Of a ger, the Bami Tipak Shera convert whose father was not Jewish, I might have thought he can't be a judge in a monetary case. So therefore, we need both tzricha to teach us that. Tosos is bother, or Tosos wants to clarify, what does it mean that a convert can judge a monetary case? Tosos says, Hashtem ashta stam ger kosher dini mamlas. From here it implies that just a regular ger convert can judge monetary case. But this is difficult because in Yevamis, in Perikachoetz, Achshrei Ravo Rav Mori bar Rachel, that he said that Ravo had Rav Mori bar Rachel. He married. Rav Mori was the son of Shmuel's daughters, and he said that his father, he had been born, and he allowed him to become a parnes and Bavel, because since his mother was Jewish, he said, we consider him to have come from amongst the Jewish people. And so therefore, he was allowed to be a judge. But generally speaking, we would say that somebody whose mother was not Jewish and converted would not be able to be a judge. So therefore, Tosfos says, what does it mean when it says the convert can be a judge? He can judge his fellow convert. Yeridon Chavero Dvar Torah. And if his mother was Jewish, he could even judge a regular Jew. And now, like Rashi says, Tosfos rejects Rashi's approach that with respect to capital cases, we're referring to that he can't do it. But with respect to monetary cases, he can. So that's Tosfos' initial approach. And again, this is a whole sugya. To what degree is a convert allowed to be a judge? Not everybody can judge a capital case. My time, what's the reason? The Tani Rav Yosef, just like a court has to be free and from any inappropriate judgments, they have to be righteous. So too, they have to not have any defects, and meaning to say that they have to have the proper lineage. So Amar Meimer Mikra, what is the source? So there's no mum. Maybe that means of an actual blemish. Amar Vach Bar Yaakov Amar Kra, imach. They will stand there. It says in the pasuk, and they sham imach. They will stand there with you. Imach b'domelach. And similar to you, they have to have the same lineage as Moshe. Maybe they're because the divine presence was there. They have to be similar to Moshe in good lineage. Now we're up to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah states, Sanhedrin Isa Kechatzi Goren Agula. The Sanhedrin was established basically in a semicircle, Kadeshia Rowan says that the judges need to see each other. Ushnei Sofrei Dayanin Omdim Lifneim, and the two scribes of the judges would stand in front of the court. Echami Yamin, Echami small, one on the right, one on the left. Mekozvin and Divrei Mizakim and Divrei Mechayvin, and they would write down the words of the argument for acquittal and conviction. Rabbi Yehuda says Shlosha. There were three scribes. Echa Kosiv Divrei Mizakim, Echa Kosiv Divrei Mechayvin, V'at Shlishi Kosiv Divrei Mizakim Divrei Chayim. He said there would be three judges. One would write the words of the judge who was arguing to acquit, one of the one who was arguing to convict, and the third would write down both arguments to make sure it's accurate. Top of 37a. There would be three rows. Rashi says each row had 23 judges in them. And the reason is because if you only had a majority of one to convict, you need to keep adding judges. So you need to add 2 and 2 until you get to another 71. And so therefore, they need to have rows of judges. And Rashi goes through the math. And they didn't want to have 2 rows of 23 and 1 row of 2. So therefore, Rashi explains how they get to it. So therefore, everybody would sit in their place, meaning to say that they go there on the basis of scholarship and seniority, who was the next judge in the line. When they needed to ordain one of the people in the galleys who was being elevated to a judge, they would take the first one who was sitting there. And then everybody would move up to his space. And then the other one will move in. Then they choose somebody from the crowd, from the community, also the shlishis, and put him on the third row. He would sit at the end of the row. So this is the idea of how the rows of the Sanhedrin were set up, and they had to see each other and engage with each other when they gave their rulings and did their deliberation. Okay, we'll stop here. Shekayach to everybody.